Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, June 1st. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 93 days. The game against Michigan in 179 days. The big day is finally here. June 1st is the first day that the NCAA mandated dead period in recruiting is now over. It started right at the beginning of the pandemic and has lasted for more than 14 months. Now it is finally done. And that means we're about to see a month of on-campus visits, commits, decommits, flips, and whatever else you can do in recruiting, unlike anything else we've ever seen before. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman is my guest this morning. We got the chance to talk to Ohio State Assistant Athletic Director for Player Personnel, Mark Pantoni, as well as Aaron Dunston, the new Director of On-Campus Recruiting, right before all this madness started. Tony, just for some perspective, can you explain how many official visits Ohio State gets in a typical year, and then how many they're expecting to get in this month alone?
Yeah, and in a typical year, Mark Pantoni said somewhere in the 40 to 50 range in that realm. And in June alone, there will be, I believe, 51 official visits. So basically, he said it a couple times in different explanations of things that's going on. You're condensing an entire year of official visits into 1 month. And so that's just imagine doing that in your job. Whoever is listening, imagine doing that in your job and condensing all of these things that you plan for and you spread out, you organize and you strategize. And then just condense it into like 4 weekends and see how gray your hair gets and how just bubbly your stomach gets, and just imagine that for yourself. And that's what Ohio State's doing now. But the good thing is they have all hands on deck to do it.
270 morning scoops in 1 month. Yes, I'm now understanding what Pantoni said when he said as soon as it flips over to June 1st, he's going to turn his phone off for probably a month. And, I think he was kidding. I don't think Mark Pantoni has an off switch, but if he does, he will flip it in July. Ohio State this weekend is started really with a bang. They are making a point to bring in their currently committed players all together this weekend rather than spacing them throughout the month. And that was an interesting question. Like, if you could space your commits out throughout the month, then you have guys who are really there putting the hard sell on your behalf around all the other guys you're bringing in this month. So why bring them in on the first weekend altogether? What did Pantoni have to say about that?
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting answer. And it was basically they're rewarding the guys who are loyal with the first visits, and they want them to be able to get into Ohio State, visit, be with each other, get to meet each other, be around each other, build this camaraderie. And they were the loyal ones. They've been committed, and everybody wants to go visit. And they decided, if you're committed, come to the first visit if you can. Now, not all of the commits can make it. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 who won't be able to, and they'll be visiting later in the month. But it was almost, to me, sounds like a reward to them for their loyalty, for being committed, for staying committed. And so, come on, everybody come together. We'll have a good time and get to know each other, get to know the coaches, get to just experience the campus, because, how many of these guys have, I'm not sure many, considering there have been almost no visits over the past, 15, 14 months now. And so I just thought it was an interesting answer, because Pantoni said they talked about it as a staff. Do we want to spread these guys out over the month and have them kind of build a rapport with the uncommitted guys and help that way? And they decided, no, let's just bring them all together. Let's just start getting that culture going immediately, even before they ever step foot on the playing field.
And yeah, you got to remember, a lot of these guys, even though they're committed to the same school, they've probably spent a lot of time looking at each other across Zoom over the last year. A lot of them haven't met in person. And, you think back to when we were all people and met other people in person, like, that makes a difference. Like, it's great to talk to someone over Zoom, but it's different when you go out and hang out, have a meal together, hang out together, play video games together, like whatever you're going to do, like, that makes a big difference in terms of, kind of building that relationship. And that's an important part of any recruiting class, is having those guys feel like they're really all together, all for one for all kind of thing. One thing that I thought was very interesting was how they're breaking up the 2022 players who are coming on official visits this month from the 2023 and 2024 players who are coming on unofficials, to start building those relationships with the newer guys who are maybe a little further out, but who they really haven't seen and really don't know a whole lot about. That's obviously a ton of people all at once. So how are they going to try and make that whole schedule work this month?
Yeah, they're asking the 2023 guys and 2024 guys to visit during the week rather than the weekend, when the 2022 guys are taking their official visits. The 2023 and 2024 guys can only take unofficial visits right now. So they would prefer them to be during the week so that they don't interfere with the official visits, and so that the 2023 and 2024 guys can get the necessary attention from the coaches and the staff that maybe they wouldn't get on a weekend. Now that hasn't worked out, I don't think, for everybody. There will be some underclassmen visiting on the weekends here and there, but for the most part, they prefer it during the week just so they can give them a better experience, spend more time with them. They aren't feeling like, oh, nobody talked to me because they're so worried about the 2022 class. And like, but that's the priority right now. And that's why they asked you to, visit during the week. That way you wouldn't feel like you're being slighted. So they're just trying to accommodate as many people as possible while making them feel like they're getting the full attention and full experience. And if you've got some underclassmen that visit during the weekend, during these official visits, they're just not going to get that full experience, they feel.
And there's some interesting distinctions between what they can do with the guys who are here on officials for 2022 and the guys who are here unofficially for 2023 and 2024. If you're here on an official, they can't work you out. If you're here unofficially and you're one of those younger classes, they can put you through a 1 hour workout with like one-on-one with a coach. So, maybe it's the wide receivers are working out with Brian Hartline. Pantoni talked all about how important it's going to be for someone like Corey Dennis or Ryan Day to get to watch those quarterbacks throw in person, one-on-one. That's going to be a very, very big deal. But there's slightly different rules on what they can do. They're going to have some camps this week in groups of 25, like pods of 25, basically. So you're starting to get that camp in-person evaluation piece in there as well. That's going to be really, really big for them. Another interesting thing is during a typical year, players often come in for their official visits in the fall for big, a big home game weekend. So it's the Michigan weekend if it's your Michigan's at home, or Penn State weekend, or Oregon this year, whatever. That is when a lot of people want to come in for an official visit. But this year, they're pretty much all coming in the summer so that they can ensure they get their visits in before anything else changes, which, I think seems reasonable based on the last year or so. Pantoni sounded like he actually preferred to have people here on non-game weekends, so not when there's a game going on. So why is that?
Yeah, and that's so that the players and the coaches can just get to know each other, spend more time with each other. That was one of the things I've talked about in the past with when there was discussions about, say, JT Tuimoloau visiting during the spring. Would it be better to have him in for the spring game or to be not in, after? And my thought was you bring him in after, that way you can spend more time with them. And that's kind of what Pantoni is saying about the official visits, having them in June. There's no games going on. There's no game planning. Everybody's all hands are on deck for recruiting and for scouting of the individual workouts and things like that. So you've got everybody there. There are no distractions. Everybody is 100% focused on recruiting. All of the attention that they normally put into game planning during the season is on recruiting. And I'm guessing for Mark Pantoni, that's all he's ever been asking for, is if everybody could just be as focused as I am, please, and just work as hard as I do about recruiting. And so now that's what he's getting. So he likes that. He didn't want to discount the game day experience of an official visit during, say, a big game, although it kind of seemed like he was maybe knocking the Ohio State home schedule this year. They didn't really have maybe a big game to bring these guys in for, but he said the game day experience doesn't trump the experience the players can have with the coaches and just seeing campus and just spending more time with coaches. Because I've always felt like the coaches are so distracted during the season. Like how can they even really give the players what they want, especially after a loss? And how often do players feel like, yeah, it was nice and you get all this rah stuff going and the game experience is fun, but how much do you really get to know about the coaches and what it's like to be there?
Well, and you also have one of the things Pantoni brought up is when you're bringing guys in for a big game is a big game. Like, I mean, if you're at Auburn, you're bringing someone in for the Iron Bowl against Alabama. If you're at Alabama, you're bringing someone in for the LSU game. If you're at LSU, you're bringing someone in for the Florida game or the Alabama game. And, a big game pretty much everywhere looks kind of the same once you're at a certain level of the sport. If you bring them in at a time that's not that, then you're doing the relationship building and the one-on-one and the whole, the sort of the holistic approach of the program, that's the stuff that Ohio State feels sets them apart. It's like, yeah, you can go to Penn State, you can go to Michigan for a big game, whatever, and it's going to, the stadium's going to be full and it's going to be kind of loud. Well, maybe not at Michigan, but the stadium's going to be kind of loud most places. You're going to have the big, exciting atmosphere. It's just, what color are the people in the stands wearing, basically. The stuff away from the field is where Ohio State feels they set themselves apart. That's one of the other reasons Pantone really liked that. And his job has typically been mostly high school recruiting over the year. I mean, that's basically, he's identifying, recruiting, ranking, putting together their board, all that kind of stuff. That is his job. But with the growth of the transfer portal, that is now starting to change a little bit. They're not leaving a huge chunk of each class open for transfers like some schools are. I mean, some schools are basically exclusively trying to recruit from the portal at this point. Ohio State is definitely not doing that. But it does sound like the portal and related portal activities are just a part of his daily routine right now.
Yeah, he said he's putting in 2 to 3 hours a day looking at film of guys who enter the portal. He did also say that because I know like whenever somebody enters the portal, Buckeye fans are like, what about him? What about him? He said, like, well, if the guy isn't a productive player somewhere else, we're not really going to be interested in them coming to Ohio State because chances are they're not going to be productive here. But he's spent a lot of time, like I said, a couple hours a day looking at film of these guys, time that he used to spend on recruits and probably still does spend looking at recruits. It's just now we're all compressing time. And he also mentioned that because there was no in-person recruiting last year, he did a lot of scouting for the Buckeyes opponents. And so he's got notes on a lot of guys that aren't Buckeyes who, when they hit the portal, the Buckeyes will have some groundwork already done on some of those players. But yeah, it's part of the normal process now. And I remember when we talked to Pantone a year or two ago when the portal was being implemented, and he said eventually there would be somebody on staff who would just, keeping track of who every player that enters, and what can they do are they a fit for Ohio State? And then just breaking down film and stuff. It's another avenue to build your player personnel. And as Mark Pantone is the director of OSU's player personnel department, there's just one more thing for him to do.
And, something else he does is he oversees the kind of marketing element of this and their brand process where they have the graphics people and they have the video people and all that kind of stuff to just kind of market these players. And that all is now getting more important than it was before because of the name, image, and likeness stuff that's kind of coming down the pipe. And, NIL is a big question mark in pretty much everything right now in college football. It does not go into effect anywhere for another month. Ohio hasn't passed their bill yet, although it sounds like they very likely will sometime this month before July, and it should go into effect on July 1 if the current bill passes. So you asked a really interesting question, like how much is NIL going to be a part of what they present to players this month? Because they have this plan where they're going to sit down with the guys and, hey, we're going to talk about your academics, and we're going to talk about how we're going to develop you as a person, how we're going to develop you as a player, how we're going to probably how they're going to get them to the NFL. Like, I mean, this is a big part of the presentation. How much of that presentation now is going to be centered around NIL this month?
Yeah, and I was trying to figure out how to ask that question and get an answer that wasn't just, quite a bit. And so I basically said, if your presentation is a pie chart, how much of that pie chart is going to be about NIL? And Aaron Dunstan, the director of on-campus recruiting, said about 30% will be talking to the players about NIL. But she said probably she's expecting about 50% of the conversation coming back from the player to be about NIL. And why wouldn't it be when, like, how many of us ignore the topic of money when we're talking about our future? None of us, So, of course, the players are going to be interested in it. And when you're talking about the possibilities and the levels that they could get to, of course, they're going to want to know about it and want to talk about it. So that it's a new world, and Ohio State is, they're not going to hide the fact that this is part of it. And almost a third of it, of their presentation being about NIL felt to me like it feels like a lot, but I don't know if it is.
It does feel like a lot, and maybe that number is going to drop a little bit as you get a little further in and people understand it a little bit more. And right now, this is just kind of like this blank mystery box of what is this going to mean? There's probably a lot of just sort of explaining it right now rather than, laying out all the benefits. But, Ohio State, they talked, Jerry Emig at one point cut in and pointed out how many people were on the Zoom with Mark Pantoni. It was 30 something people on the Zoom with Mark Pantoni and Aaron Dunstan. Like, there's a lot of interest in Ohio State football. This is a big media market. There's a lot of interest across the state. It's the sixth biggest state, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of reason to think that NIL will benefit Ohio State, in terms of guys being able to make some money. But also, yeah, I was with you. I mean, that does seem a little bit high because, you don't want guys making decisions solely based on NIL. If the difference is you're going to, you can make $300,000 on your name, image, and likeness during your time at Ohio State. Like, that's a bunch of money. There's probably not a huge number of players who are going to make that. That's the difference between being the 15th pick in the NFL draft and the 19th pick in the NFL draft. If you're going to make your decision based on that, like it's a big amount of money, but in the big picture, if you're going to be, if you're one of that top elite percentage of players in the long term, it's really a rounding error for the most part in your development. And then also, hey, if you go pro in something other than sports, as they say, are you going to have a degree that, you can $300,000 in the long term is not that much money based on how much you can make if you have a really, really lucrative career versus a not lucrative career. So yeah, it is interesting. I do wonder if that number is going to drop a little bit as the years go on and there are fewer questions and people sort of understand the basics. And then it's just kind of like, here's what we can do for you basically at that point. But this is going to be a huge month for every program in the country. Pantoni compared it to pushing all your chips into the center of the table. So why is June such a big deal for them and for pretty much every other program in the country?
Well, just being the first time that players have had a chance to visit and get to see everything, you would expect tons of commits at this point because they're finally, a lot of this is going to be affirmation and confirmation for the players. Like, yes, okay, I want to be here. And it's interesting that like everything has opened up. All the schools are doing this and they're all trying to capitalize as quickly as possible. Of course, then you're still going to have to hold on to everybody. But I asked Mark Pantoni, like, you've put together some ridiculous classes at Florida, ridiculous classes at Ohio State. Is this the biggest month you've ever experienced? And, he said it will be. And mentioned turning off the phone in July, but if you strike out this month, you may not be able to recover. And all of these official visits, this may be the last time you see the players on campus. They may not return. And so Pantoni said they're going to try to entice players to come back for unofficial visits during the season, see some games. And it's interesting how it's kind of reversed. It used to be you come in the spring for unofficials and your officials would be for the games in the winter, in the fall. It's kind of switched. And so there is, you say pushing your chips in, it's a gamble to bring so many players in this early because it's going to be the last time, could be the last time you see some of these guys. And then for Ohio State, the guys that are coming in the weekend of June 4th, the non-committed guys, they're going to go see 3-4 other places this month. And there's some concern, like how long does the Ohio State luster last with the guys who then go see Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Washington State. And so there's some danger, but, it's still Ohio State. Things are going to work out as they're supposed to. But, there's so many different things that are new. This is one of those things where it's not necessarily new, but it's fresh. And you got to kind of stay fresh through all of these visits.
And you do potentially have a chance to get those 2022s back on campus this fall for unofficials. So you may get another bite at the apple. That is not true of 2021 guys or 2021 guy, as the case may be. He was asked about 2021 players who haven't signed, and really, let me read between the lines for you there. That is a question about one 21 player, the top overall player in the class, JT Tuimoloau. According to NCAA rules, Pantoni can't say his name. So the question was framed more generally as like, hey, if there was hypothetically, if there was a 2021 guy out there, it sure sounds like if Tuamaloa wanted in, they would probably find a spot for him. That's not really a huge shock, but a spot for him or anyone else they think could help this year's team as a transfer.
Yeah, I did like the fact that Pantoni said, they are still looking to add another high school senior or somebody from the portal. Like he combined the two, like, whatever. I mean, if anybody's out there that can play at Ohio State, sure, they're looking to add them, and they've got room. But yeah, the one thing he didn't say is no, we don't have any room for any more high school players, and so they will be hosting him later this month, and we'll see. But yeah, they'll make room. If there wasn't room, they'd make it, or they might just hold a spot for him. It was interesting that they're not going to hold spots for transfer portal guys, but Pantoni did also say like attrition is what it is. Players transfer out, they transfer in. There's always going to be room for somebody that you want to bring in.
Yeah, they are not planning on just like holding 2 spots open after every recruiting class for specifically for transfer portal guys. Ohio State has actually had a very relatively low number of players transfer out. I think I saw a list where they were like the lowest of anyone in the Big Ten. They had like 5 guys in the portal this offseason. There were schools like Penn State and Michigan, I think, that had 17, 20 guys in the portal. So, I mean, Ohio State has a relatively low amount of turnover, but everybody has turnover. So, yeah, they don't feel they need to, stay at 83 specifically to have 2 spots for transfer portal guys to bring in if they find guys they want who are good fits. That's just something that sort of the numbers always seem to work themselves out. And even at a spot like Ohio State, where there is some relatively low numbers in that in the outbound portal. Tony, thank you for joining me. Thank you for that was a fun conversation with Mark Pantoni and Aaron Dunston. And boy, are we headed into a fascinating month. This is going to be like, I don't know how else I can say this. I feel like I've said this for 3 months now. Like this is going to be bananas this month. This is cramming an entire an entire year worth of official visits into 1 month. There's going to be, we're going to probably have a show every week where it's just, okay, how did last weekend go? Okay, how's next weekend going? Who's coming in next weekend? There are a ton of big names, some of the biggest names in the entire country. JT Tuamaloa for 2021, lots of 4- and 5-star guys, tons of top 100 guys coming in this month. The Ohio State has 51 visits, we said. So yeah, of the 51 visits, I would guess that probably 35 to 40 of them are guys ranked in the top 100 in the nation. So it is going to be a very busy, very exciting month. And this is, you don't normally think of June as a busy and exciting and important month in the college football calendar. This might be the most important month outside of games. This might be the single most important month of the last 12 months or the next 12 months for the future of Ohio State and pretty much every other college football program in the country. So if you want to know what's going on, you want to know who's coming in, how things are going, the only place to do that is BuckeyeScoop.com. We have our fantastic team of recruiting insiders, Mark Givler, Bill Green, Alex Gleitman, Mick Walker, and they will be all over all of the visits, talking to all the players. Ohio State has camps coming up that they'll be keeping an eye on that stuff. You never know who you're going to find at a camp. They have, you end up with players such as Darren Lee, who basically had to beg Ohio State for an offer, finally earned it at a camp, and turned out to be a pretty decent player. And there are plenty of guys like that over the years. You're going to have them even more this year because these players haven't been able to get evaluated in person by these coaches. So you're going to see even more stuff like that happening this month. Make sure you check that all out at BuckeyeScoop.com. If you sign up for a membership today, you'll get access to all of that, plus our As the Insiders board, plus some fun extra perks for signing up before our first anniversary. That happens Friday, so don't wait. Sign up today. If you wait till past Friday, you'll miss out on those perks. You'll also, if you're signed up by July 4th, you'll be entered for a drawing for 4 tickets to this year's Ohio State-Oregon game, courtesy of Nevada Buck. That's a pretty good deal as well. Just look those up on StubHub or somewhere like that, and it was like $400 a ticket. So, your Buckeye Scoop membership is actually a pretty good deal, pretty good potential ROI there if you win that drawing. So you can sign up today at BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, make sure you check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. We are going to have a ton of shows with really interesting, up-to-date content this month because there is a lot to talk about. Gives in the Bank, Around the Oval, Buckeye Weekly, Buckeye Sloopcast. They're all there. Just check them all out. Just search Buckeye Scoop on whatever your podcast platform of choice is. You'll find those. You can subscribe right there so you never miss an episode. Also leave us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows as well. And last of all, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified every time we post a new video. We have the entire interview with Mark Pantoni and Aaron Dunstan up there, for example. That was one of the things we posted pretty recently. But all of our podcasts are up there. All of our interviews with players and coaches. When we're at camps, you'll have videos from camps. You'll have interviews with players. It's all up there. It's all coming fast and furious this month. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.